When there is no truth in advertising, you've entered the realm of propaganda. It's different and a perversion. It's advertising's evil twin. When we advertise something, the assumption is we're showing you what you're going to get, making it as best we can, and hoping you enjoy it. And if you don't like it, or you like it, is up to you. You make up your own mind. When propaganda is the tool, you're given very specific instructions. You're told what to think, and what you're given is almost never what they promise. It's a facsimile of what was promised. It's a false promise, backed up by falsehoods and false stories. Let's take a look at some of the methods used by propagandists. Corporate access New Trek propaganda site Trek Culture is owned by some combination of CBS, Secret Hideout, Paramount Plus, Bad Robot, and New Trek. When the professional public relations people who make the content for Trek Culture aren't making Star Trek content, you can catch them making content for the Rings of Power. They are paid PR professionals who work essentially for New Trek and CBS. I'm not talking about some other independent YouTubers' take. I'm talking about Access Media. The fact that they are Access Media is burned into their videos and visible when you watch it. The link for the video I'm going to be sharing with you today and transforming is in the description. The latest product these paid professionals have crafted is called Star Trek 10 Secret Artifacts at Daystrom Station. So as you can see there, it is a misspelling or a concocted word that they failed to run through spell check. They don't have a lot of respect for our intelligence, but they show that they aren't that intelligent a lot themselves with mistakes like this.
If there's one thing that's constant, or at least has been for a while now, it's that Richard Daystrom's name carries respect and carries the idea of innovation and exploration in science in Star Trek.
Alright, so we're talking about a legacy character from the original series, Richard Daystrom.
Just maybe don't look.
There he is, pictured with our most beloved of Star Trek actors. We have the best ever and only ever Captain Kirk, William Shatner. We have the amazing DeForest Kelley as the only Dr. McCoy I recognize, and the beautiful Nichelle Nichols doing an amazing job as the incredible Lieutenant Uhura, the only Lieutenant Uhura who is valid. And there, of course, is Richard Daystrom. He was a boy genius, and his first round of inventions went quite well. He invented all the technology they used to run the Enterprise. But his next invention, the M5 computer, doesn't go quite as well.
At what happened in his last mission. Anyway,
that's some propaganda right there. If you listen to what the New Trek propagandist is saying, that's not a quip. They really just don't want you to watch the episode Ultimate Computer. Here, listen to it again.
In Star Trek, just maybe don't look at what happened in his last mission. Anyway.
So, that's how they're approaching this great Star Trek story. The story of the Ultimate Computer. They're telling you that you probably don't want to watch it. The reason they don't want you to watch it is because it's a great story. It presages what happens in 2001: A Space Odyssey, but comes out before that movie and is not influenced by it. And if you could do for me what the New Trek people are asking you to do for them, and like and subscribe this video, I'd be personally very grateful. I'm stronger with you than without you.
The Daystrom Institute has existed for almost as long as the man himself, but this article's not about that.
So they're showing you the Daystrom Institute as pictured in New Trek. Don't think we ever see the Institute itself in any iteration of old Star Trek. This is a very boring looking workplace. It is not as technologically advanced as the workplaces that you and I would use. And in fact, it's just a bunch of chairs from our time, the cheapest possible tables from IKEA, and absolutely no computers or technology of any kind, no view screen on the wall. This room does not look Star Trek, and it doesn't really even look 21st century. This room looks like a workspace from possibly the late 70s or early 80s. There is more technology on the desks in the show Mary Tyler Moore than you see here at the Daystrom Institute, where they do scientific research and train scientists for the Federation.
This article's about Daystrom Station.
So what you can see here, and what they're going to continue to do, is make passive-aggressive attacks at old Star Trek to try to elevate their new Star Trek. And they already have started that. They've shown you what they say is the Daystrom Institute, and it's as boring as could be, and it looks like, I mean, you could use that set on Mad Men. There was so little technology, none, in fact, available. There was no technology to be seen there. It was just tables or desks and rolling chairs. It was a stripped-down conference center from like some hotel somewhere. But, you know, this is obviously better. Look at this exotic space station that we never really found out where it was. That's sort of a really evil place where the Federation has some kind of prison where they have unethical medical experiments run on captured foundlings and who knows who else. It's absolutely not in the tradition of the Federation that we knew.
With that in mind, I'm Sean Ferrick for Trek Culture.
Sean Ferrick and his writer are great Star Trek, New Trek dissembling propagandists. They know how to weave together a false narrative using defamation, guilt by association, bad faith arguments, and false co-equivalences with the best of them. Sean Ferrick can be found covering other projects like Rings of Power when he's not doing Trek Culture. But congratulations, Sean. At the beginning of the year, you announced that you were going to lose some weight, and it looks like that journey has been successful for you. Way to go.
And here are 10 top secret artifacts.
So there we have it. 10 top secret artifacts at Daystrom Station. The word artifacts is not spelled that way. Artifacts is not a word. It's some kind of mistake they made when they didn't bother to spell check their title. Artifacts is spelled with an I, not an E.
Artifacts at Daystrom Station. Number 10, the Genesis device.
Alright, so the idea that they would have a Genesis device is kind of just contrary to what the Federation stands for. The Genesis device is basically Star Trek's Death Star. It can destroy a planet.
The true granddaddy of all Federation-made apocalypse-inducing machines, envisaged as...
So, saying it's the granddaddy of all Federation-made apocalyptic-inducing machines is to imply that the Federation makes planet-destroying apocalypse machines all day, every day. This was not the case until Star Trek was taken over by these terrible creators, and Starfleet and Starfleet Command, as well as the Federation, became evil matriarchies that were very warlike and very, very violent. And you can see the Paramount Pictures logo burned onto this at the bottom of the screen, below the taskbar.
As creating life from lifelessness, the brainchild of Carol and David Marcus caused all sorts of galactic upheaval, but was almost forgotten as quickly as it had arrived.
Now that would fall under the category of being a falsehood. That is just false. We found out about the Genesis device in Star Trek II and dealt with the implications of it throughout that movie, Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, and we're still kind of dealing with fallout from it in the effects on Spock in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. So when they say mentioned and moved on from, what they're saying is the 3 highly successful films in the Genesis trilogy, as fans call it, was just something they mentioned and moved on from. In fact, 2 entire movies and much of a third are influenced directly by their interactions with the Genesis device, something that is a horrible weapon, easily perverted, and really not in line with Federation values.
Comprising a control unit and a missile to deliver its payload, the only known example of the device was lost in the Battle of the Mutara Nebula.
So rather than saying you remember it from Wrath of Khan, which is a really good movie, their best movie, probably, and one of the best movies ever made, they just reference the Battle of the Mutara Nebula. There's no mention so far of William Shatner. There's no mention of Leonard Nimoy. There's no mention of Ricardo Montalban. We've seen them on screen. They're some of the greatest and most beloved actors in all of Star Trek. And this celebration of Star Trek has absolutely no mention of them at all. And no mention of the movie they're in. It's just called the Battle of the Mutara Nebula.
When it was activated by one Khan Noonien Singh. Somehow, Section 31 had acquired a second, but it could be that they had built it fresh, utilized.
Now, we don't know this. They're going to use a little bit of what I would call bad faith here by saying, since we didn't see it, had to have happened. Listen to how that works.
The plans from the original. At no point of the franchise has it ever been confirmed what happened to the Marcus's research and data, with at least the presentations and reports from Carol and Jim Kirk likely to have been classified during the...
Alright, so they don't know what happened, and they're saying that these things are classified, but that's ridiculous. They obliterated a nebula, created a planet that then exploded. The planet was around long enough for them to tell everyone that they were not allowed to go there. Classifying this would be like classifying the sinking of the Titanic or the eruption of Vesuvius. It's not possible. It's just a ridiculous suggestion.
23rd century. Plus, of course, the entire sector knew of Genesis, as was noted by Admiral Morrow in The Search for Spock.
So they're contradicting themselves and shaking things up to get you ready for all the misinformation.
Federation Council too viewed the records during the investigation into the incident at the beginning of the voyage home, and who...
So there was a lot of doublespeak here just to waste some time.
Who's to say that among the delegates there weren't members of Section 31 who...
Who's to say, because we didn't see it, it must have happened.
Who's to say that they didn't already have the project data in their possession?
So that's their rules. Anything not specifically ruled out by the show probably happened and can happen. They're just going to make it happen. And they're going to say that it's true to Star Trek when it's not. That's why this is propaganda and not advertising. Let's check out some of these great secrets, these great artifacts at Daystrom Station.
Number 9. Aretan androids.
Alright, we're going to know what these are when we see them, but they're going to make a bathroom joke about it, and they're going to try to make themselves sound smarter than you by addressing it with a term that we're not familiar with as far as using it. It's from an episode we will all readily recognize when we see it.
There's definitely a certain fascination with androids and synthetic life aboard the Daystrom Station. Nothing's...
Now, as true as that might be about Daystrom Station, there's just the fact that these androids were not ever activated, and Roddenberry androids are not like Bradbury androids. Roddenberry androids, for the most part, want to be human or become android supremacists who want to destroy all the humans. An android who wanted to be human would be Data. An android who was human and became an android would lose their personality and become android-like and lose their humanity. Roger Corby had no humanity. He had become a robot supremacist, as we saw in episode What Little Girls Are Made Of.
His original series more than a set of talking, flashing orbs, but this time we're not here for the balls.
Boy, that was as funny as some of the jokes in the new Trek show, huh? We're not here for the balls. We're gonna continue now with rampant speculation and misinformation that is from the people at Trek Culture.
those lovely schemers behind Section 31 have also acquired an Aretan android. Now,
So, you know, we didn't see it on screen, but they're going to say it happened. And here
name
we
might
have
not...
two fairly well-loved Star Trek actors. We have the immortal James Doohan playing Scotty, and Diana Muldaur, who will come back as Dr. Pulaski. There she is in the original series. She's in a couple of episodes. These people are Star Trek royalty, and their characters, again, Scotty on the Mount Rushmore of Star Trek characters. I'm sure that they're going to mention James Doohan and Scotty.
Not immediately bring the episode and incident to mind, but the name Sargon might. Featured in the original...
So we've seen Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, William Shatner, and their characters, Captain Kirk, Dr. McCoy, and Spock. We haven't bothered to mention them at all. We haven't paid any tribute to them at all.
Original series episode Return to Tomorrow, the android body was a potential host for the last survivors of the Aretan race.
This was an interesting concept for Star Trek, where they had a race of beings who perceived that there was going to be an apocalypse that would destroy their planet and their species. Some of them were able to turn themselves into like AI-like uploads of their Katras or their souls, their personalities, whatever you want to call it. But the time spent in the artificial confinement and the time they spent in the human and Vulcan bodies they acquire later has an effect on them. Like all Roddenberry androids who get human form, they want to keep that human form. They do not want to return to the android bodies. Why you would have these androids seems preposterous. Why hold on to them? But I suppose they are advanced. Don't know if they can compare to the Soong type. It seems as though they needed a lot more programming or the soul of some dead Orishan to be injected directly into them to give them any purpose.
Sargon, his wife Thalassa, and their associate Henoch. Initially, the three would...
Henoch is amazing and is well played by the amazing Leonard Nimoy, whose name has still not been mentioned here.
...inhabit the bodies of Kirk, Dr. Mulhall, played by Diana Muldaur, and Spock, respectively. While
we just mentioned every character, but the only person who got named was Diana Muldaur. So 3 people, 2 men, 1 woman. We only mentioned Diana Muldaur. You can see basically the philosophy they're coming from here in this propaganda.
This gave them their first leg stretch in a few thousand years. The ultimate plan was for the trio to receive their own android bodies.
That's Dr. Pulaski, ladies and gentlemen. That's Dr. Pulaski from the 60s. So of course this plan doesn't work out because the people who are constructing these androids still have a desire to have flesh and blood bodies, like all Roddenberry androids, like Data.
Synthetic shell is less than enthralling for both Henoch and Thalassa. Plus,
right, as we know in Star Trek, androids want to be human, and the only time a human would willingly become an android is if they were about to die, like Ira Graves. And unfortunately, one problem I have with Trek culture is they tend to dispense the information as you would to a child. So, in order to get some kind of quality of time invested out of them, we're going to have to mess the playback speed a little bit, enhance it.
Plus, the android bodies are nowhere near as advanced and lifelike as Soong would perfect in the following century, but it does represent an early attempt at creating mechanical life. Number 8.
It's a science station, not a museum. Why have artifacts there? These robots were constructed 140 to 160 years before the events of Star Trek Picard Season 3, where we don't see them, but we hear they're there. We hear that they're there.
Attack Tribble. An extreme...
This was as stupid as it sounds. The attack Tribble was just one of the dumbest things, and you would be forgiven for not knowing what it was in any way, shape, or form. I just thought that this is how New Trek Tribbles act when they're put into some sort of horrible confinement. So there you have it, the attack Tribble. It was in a dark and murky environment. We could barely see what it was. But they're telling us now, so it must mean that that's what it was. I thought it was just, again, their version of a tribble, because, you know, this 125% different new Trek that we get. And let's hear some of their crazy lore and lies.
Its population at a breakneck pace. Fans can imagine that planetary...
Now, what they're saying here is that the attack tribble is a brilliant military weapon, which is kind of preposterous. They keep trying to say that about the dinosaurs at Jurassic Park too, but they're so dangerous and impossible to control. I don't know what you would do to launch a military attack with tribbles or with attack tribbles. It seems ridiculous. It seems to me that they're just kind of ready to go. Beam them down as is into some agricultural area and they'll devastate your enemy's food supply. They're a terrible blight as is, but we're going to talk some falsehoods about them and refer to this terrible episode of Short Treks where it was about 10 to 12 minutes long, too short to really be called a show, and absolutely just an attack on Star Trek canon done just because they wanted to.
Conquest would be a cakewalk with these as the main weapon. Suffice it to...
Yeah, instead of a Genesis device, drop tribbles on them. That's pretty brilliant. Undercutting your own point from 1 minute back.
Say that the cleanup might take a while, given it's the average tribble... No, we're not starting that line.
Yeah, we're not going to get into the lore of actual Star Trek, are we, Sean? All right.
After their rather mixed appearance in The Trouble with Edward seems to indicate that Starfleet was responsible for their accelerated reproduction.
Yeah, that was one of the most ridiculous 12-minute short treks of all. It was an absolute attack on canon. We found out that to make the tribbles breed quicker, we gave them human DNA, as if it doesn't take like almost a year for a human being to reproduce. You know, babies take 9 months. I don't know how that's an accelerant. And then we find out that they did this so that they could have them for food, and that there's tribble cereal, you know, where you eat them bones and all. And it's just ridiculous because now that they're making them with gene-spliced human DNA, tribble cereal essentially is cannibalism. So now what I said when I first saw this is going to come to fruition. This is a weapon against Star Trek canon and an attempt to justify their horrible stories. Listen to this.
Accelerated reproduction, it was only logical to go totally dark with the Klingon Empire's most feared foe. It's shocking.
The Klingon Empire's most feared foe. Not the Romulans, but something that was described to them like being a filthy, annoying version of a squirrel, akin to a rat. The tribbles were pretty much vermin. They were cute vermin, but they were vermin. They consumed, and when removed from the area where they had natural predators, they could just devastate an ecosystem and then themselves end up starving, because what are you going to eat once you cover the planet with hungry tribbles who are pregnant with other tribbles and just going to keep on reproducing and keep on eating? So to say this about the Klingon Empire, it's an absolute lie, and it's part of misinformation and propaganda known as defamation. We're going to defame the Klingons. Their arch enemies aren't someone like the Romulans. Okay, this was the most underlit show in the history of television. You couldn't see what was going on, and I'm going to show you now some of the manipulation they do to make it seem like we actually saw anything in this, and who knows if they re-enhanced it, but this is a different take.
We're about to see underneath the hood of a tribble. This one...
Alright, so this is what we saw. That's how we saw it. This is not supposed to be a typical tribble. Apparently this is an attack tribble. But since we'd never seen it before and no one said anything, I don't know how we were supposed to know. I thought it was just a normal tribble that was like in confinement and pain and trying to escape in the new Trek fashion. See how they zoomed in really close as though that happened in the show? That didn't happen in the show. This is a much closer look.
But wouldn't the three mouths just call?
And now they're claiming that this is a great and dangerous weapon, you know, in a way that makes no sense. In bad faith. They're making a bad faith argument.
Was a shiver down the spine anyway. Number 7, Borg vinculum.
Now, anytime something sounds really smart and really intellectual, on this show. Anytime they give something a lofty and extended title, you can be sure it's really, really dumb. And that's what this is.
Vinculum itself means a connecting band of tissue, such as that attaching a flexor tendon to the bone of a finger or toe.
So somebody like saw this on like some kind of like word game or something, or they're helping their kid with their physics homework, because this is like, you know, I don't know, high school anatomy. This is like, you know, science homework from high school, maybe freshman year of college at best.
Which lines up with how such a device connects the Borg collective, and is well worth stealing, as fans saw in Star Trek Voyager's.
So there we go with the false coequivalence. We're equating new Trek with real Trek and saying, hey, this is from Voyager, so it's good.
5th season episode Infinite Regress. For the Borg.
And of course they had to show an accelerated and preposterous moment from Voyager and not allow Jerry Ryan to be seen as beautiful. That was that's what we do here. We don't miss a chance to put down old Star Trek, even if it has people from the new Star Trek in it.
The vinculum connects the minds of the drones together, removing individuality and passing information.
Now here we see some Borg drones, but they're not like the best Borg drones we've ever seen. They're not from the movie First Contact. These appear to me to be Voyager Borg drones, you know, so they curated these pictures to send a certain message, you know, a message about quality. Like I said, they're trying to tell us that since Star Trek is already bad, you should accept their bad Star Trek.
Among the Hive. As Janeway puts it, it brings order to chaos. For Section 31, this would have been one of their must-have items without.
So these people that can't get a show that they've been asking for so long, that the star they wanted for Section 31 has gone from their 40s to their 60s. A show that they just cannot get off the ground, Section 31. This is what Section 31 would do. And out of spite, the New Trek people have simply turned the entire Federation into Section 31 because they couldn't get their Section 31 show. In New Trek, there doesn't need to be a Section 31, even though there is. Everyone's a spy. Everyone is devious. Everyone has a dark secret. Everyone's a traitor. Raffi, presented as a hero, has mutinied 12 times. For that, she was made a Federation space cop. She got high and fell off the wagon while on assignment and had to be rescued by Worf. So the story goes, Worf deleted somebody for fun, but they called it a rescue anyway. And then, later on, they make her first officer on the rechristened Enterprise with 7. Now, why you would let a former Borg and a 12 or 13 time mutineer on board and in charge of your starship is beyond me. This is supposedly a really powerful ship, and you're putting on someone who's going to go for Mutiny 14 and a member of the Borg as your command team. You don't want to break it up and have one person who's a little reliable. You want 2 complete wild cards in the hierarchy here.
Question. A vinculum would provide the best way to understand the links of the collective mind and, as the episode showed, a possible way to bring chaos to order.
So then they go on for a while with this nonsense from Voyager's, you know, Star Trek lore. And sometimes Voyager just really got it wrong. So they're exploiting things that happen in Voyager and trying to push down the bar of Star Trek and make things that just aren't acceptable seem normal. For the next few minutes, they go on at length about the canceled cartoon Star Trek Prodigy, which was the Star Trek cartoon allegedly for children. All I can say is, thank God they no longer are making children's content. The last people you want to instruct or allegedly entertain your children, if they can really be said to have entertained anyone, are the New Trek people. This show is a disaster and would have gotten them in a lot of trouble. They're fortunate it ended. These people have no business entertaining or trying to address topics fit for children. The New Trek of today is profane, immoral, nonsense, and absolutely PG-13. You can forget about fun for the whole family. I'm going to shuttle ahead and spare you And you can get a look here at just how substandard and uninteresting the art was on Star Trek Prodigy. There was really, I didn't find it engaging or enjoyable when I watched it for a few minutes, and I don't really try to get into their animated cartoons. I was forced to watch some of Lower Decks when it was part of Strange New Worlds, which I review, and I gave that episode a 0, by the way. That's as much of the animated Star Trek as I've seen. All I can say is it wasn't good, but it was possibly somewhat better than Strange New Worlds and Picard. You know, in a hierarchy of things that are terrible, it was less terrible than the other two, but still by no means good. The next couple of things they say is just speculative, absolute headcanon from the writer about how they could have gotten this device and where it could have come from, including, you know, maybe the Battle of First Contact, where I would point out it would have been a great idea to use that Borg weapon that they had in place since the events of Best of Both Worlds. So they waited 30 years to use it. They didn't use it during the Battle of First Contact, where it probably would have been enough to win the day, because they almost pull it off as it is. They do enormous damage to Starfleet before they even have to resort to the Plan B in that movie. They're calling this next item they're going to talk about the android duplicator. It's from the episode What Little Girls Are Made Of.
In the initial season of the original series, the classic What Are Little Girls Made Of introduced Star Trek viewers to their first, of many, android nemesis.
So here we are intercutting between classic Star Trek and their bad new Trek, showing New Chapel after showing scenes from What Are Little Girls Made Of.
We've yet to see Dr. Roger Corby woo Nurse Chapel in Strange New Worlds, despite several name drops. The machine...
There's the real Roger Corby and the real Nurse Chapel. I wonder, will they bother to name anyone? Maybe they'll say Majel Barrett's name. She's like the first lady of Star Trek, beloved by all Star Trek fans. Let's see what they do.
He discovered in the caves of XO3 is sitting in its own room on Daystrom. Probably quite a deep...
They didn't even mention her at all. They just kind of glossed right over it. We've only had Diana Muldaur shouted out so far. We've mentioned characters, but no actors. Not even the most beloved ones, or the ones that were most beloved to Gene Roddenberry. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Andrea. Look at that beautiful woman. She is there because she is so beautiful. That's why they hired her, because she's really beautiful. And next to her, check out that alien. That's a damn good alien for 1967, and really not even the worst one now. It's better than the non-aliens we see constantly on New Trek, and as good as any alien really they've thrown us, save one or two. They haven't tried really hard to work in a lot of aliens. In fact, if you watch New Trek, because they don't have any money for things like extras or, you know, turning people into aliens, it would seem like, you know, Starfleet was mostly just humans, but this is more about having a moment here to take a look at the beautiful Andrea. She was an android created by Corby. She may have been part of his original party, and she may have been created by Corby, or she may have been killed when she was created by Corby, or she may have already been dead. We don't know. Corby's become an android supremacist because he himself has become an android. It retained his personality, but it slowly lost its humanity. It only had enough humanity left to delete itself when it realized that it was completely evil. And of course, because it's propaganda and it's New Trek, they're going to show Captain Kirk in a way that's just embarrassing. Harrison, isn't this just an insult?
How dare you?
I gotta agree with you on that one. In their continuing dispensation of dumb, irrelevant, or unimportant information, we just take a really, really obscure way of saying we have the probe from Inner Light at the Daystrom station. I guess they'd want to hold on to it because it's advanced technology, and it was really good at inducing a highly convincing hallucination of having another life, and a time compression hallucination where, you know, in just like 25 minutes Picard lives a whole life. So of course they also show the Ricecan flute and every other member berry they can think of associated with this episode before moving on. It has really no value as information to us. So at this point, after trying to make us feel dumb by using obscure terms for things that we would have known if they just said what they were outright, they're going to try to mix two different methods of misinformation together. Here we go.
Relive an entire life aboard the space of 25 minutes. Hardly a substitute for a session on the holodeck, the probe was
Here we go.
never mentioned again following its activation and subsequent retrieval in The Next Generation's The Inner Light. Fans may have hypothesized that it would be returned to Starfleet for scientific...
Right, so they go on this long screed about how, like, they never mention this again. You know, the way they never mention the Genesis device again, you know. But in this case, they really don't ever mention it again. So they're saying the same thing about two different situations that had nothing in common. One's the Genesis device, and one is this probe. And it just makes absolutely no sense. And again, they're going to tell you that because you didn't not see them do it, that means they definitely did. It's bad faith, and you know what they're doing is they're putting a false coequivalence between this and the Genesis device, trying to say they're equal. The reason why we never mention this probe from Inner Light again is because it was a one-episode story. Even though we kind of talk about what happened in Inner Light again and see his flute, it was only a one-episode idea. We didn't need the probe flying around out there. I mean, I guess because it's advanced, Starfleet would want it, but, you know, the rest of this is just fanciful headcanon and false coequivalencies in the best traditions of Orwellian misinformation back from the Cold War, you know, the kind they use in North Korea. Number 4, the Thalaron generator, is one of the more fanciful inventions of this entire trip through speculation and propaganda. It's from the last TNG movie, the one with Tom Hardy, and we don't see it at all, and it's just on an L-car on the wall, and they spend like 5 minutes just prattling on about it in what I would consider a waste of time. Let me just show you how little this is in the episode. This entire trip through the Daystrom station, which took a little while, but I mean, these are things we saw for 10 and 15 seconds, or even less, like 1 or 2 seconds. We saw the attack trivial for like a half second, and the next thing we're going to show you, we saw for like literally a half second, and they're again going to play some games here to make it look like it was a bigger part of the show than it was. Here we have the Thalaron generator from the Scimitar in action, where Data makes his self-sacrifice. I guess this is my favorite death of Data. Really, this is the only thing you're going to remember it from, and they're just showing it really quickly, and they make a false coequivalence between this and the Genesis device, trying to draw an equivalent between this bad movie and that fantastic movie that has Ricardo Montalban and William Shatner. Again, more fanciful lies, a false coequivalence made in bad faith. It's defamation, if not outright falsehoods. And there it is. That's when we see the Thalaron generator is on Daystrom Station in the show Picard. They just walk by it. And if he looks at it, he looks at it, or this could be a different take. It's just, I don't know. They're not known for their honesty, but you know, this is as much as we see of it.
There's no indication of the size of this piece of technology, so it could...
See what happened there? They had to freeze frame it and zoom in on it. They just kind of walked right past it. Then they speculate, you know, it could be a small one or a larger one, and You could be able to destroy a whole planet or just be a threat to a room full of people and blah, blah, blah. It's just, it was something on an LCARS display. That was it. They're trying to act like this was some sort of threat they were trying to neutralize in the show. It's false. It's a falsehood in this piece of propaganda. We're almost done. We've made it to number 3. That's not a misspelling. B4 is the actual designation of the robot that, well, android, that Data makes to try to replicate himself, so to speak, so that he can kind of exceed the lifespan of his body or have some company. He's constructed B4 in his own image, and we find it in the last TNG movie. So a lot like Rise of Skywalker, Data isn't truly dead for all that long. We don't find out that B4 isn't really viable for years and years and years until we get the first season of Bad Show Picard, where Data dies again. I just want to say the death from Star Trek Nemesis is my favorite Data death, and not necessarily the only, though. You know, he dies a few times. He's up there with Patrick Stewart as far as how many times you can have one character die on screen, you know, with Patrick Stewart's Professor X. Okay, they're going to mix several propaganda methods together here with this B4 story. They've gone on at length about B4, but now they're going to say a few things that are just plain old propaganda. It's basically a bad faith argument and a false co-equivalence, and it makes the entire thing what you would have to call a falsehood. Here it is.
Dismissed as Nemesis itself, the late introduction of soon prototype B4 allowed a backdoor escape for Data following his death aboard the Scimitar. It would be a backdoor...
Okay, so, you know, almost nearly as quickly dismissed as Nemesis itself, as though Nemesis was not a dismissible movie. It's alright, you know, you can watch it. I wouldn't call it particularly good or particularly exciting. It's definitely forgettable. It's definitely not the greatest Star Trek movie, and there's a reason why it was the last one. So by describing the Thalaron generator in the same terms they use to describe the Genesis device, they've created a false co-equivalence, and now they're going to indulge in some absolute headcanon after elevating forgettable Star Trek Nemesis by mentioning it in the same sentence without saying the name Wrath of Khan. They talked about the events of that movie.
There, nonetheless, Data's return would be realised through the awakening of the Soong Golem, but B4's remains also made their way there. Fans will recall...
So they're going to compare the Soong Golem to B4 for a minute here. Remember, Data made B4. The Soong Golem was made by some criminalistic mad scientist descendant of Noonien Soong, who tried to start an apocalypse that would have, I guess, destroyed him as well, since he's organic. But he tried to do what Bender always says, kill all the humans. He opened up a door to another dimension, and like a cybernetic Cthulhu started to come through, and then for no real reason they turned that off, and we're supposed to believe he's good. He made this evil monster that saves them the money of having to de-age Brent Spiner. They could do it. They're not going to. They found a cheap shortcut, and that's what Star Trek Picard was. It was an experiment in making very bad Star Trek as cheaply and badly as possible, and just convincing people that it was good. Now, to be fair, the Star Trek that immediately preceded it had been so bad that just because this story was really, really slow and boring, it had less stupidity in it because it simply had less events.
All the B4's parts were last seen stored at the Daystrom Institute on Earth when Jean...
We just saw, again, the fake Daystrom Center, the one that is not in Next Generation but in the show Picard, and does not look like a futuristic workplace at all.
Luke was investigating the appearance of Daj Asha. Between then, 2399, and the opening of Season 3, 2 years later in 2401,
This just, no one cares. But at least, you know, We got Allison Pill on there. I wonder if she's going to get sick. That's she did that about 4 times that season.
4 has been moved off the planet to the more secure facility where the minds of all of Soong's works have been combined into one entity. The pre-lore.
So yeah, that's another thing that happens in Picard season 3, is that Data is combined with Lore and some sociopathic descendant of Soong. And of course Lal, for no reason really, because Lal only lives 3 days. They just dump that in there. Her extra 72 hours of life experience are considered important, and she's an equal part of this foursome inside of the one android body that conveniently looks like older Brett Spiner, so that we don't have to de-age anyone or spend any money. I suppose that this now means that the android is something like 1/4 female and arguably non-binary. I have a funny feeling the New Trek people will make mention of it, but it's really just unimportant headcanon and misinformation, really, because this fanfic isn't Star Trek. They're making a false co-equivalence between B4 and their invented Soong Gullum. The idea here being that B4 was stuck on Forrest Gump mode and couldn't do anymore, but their Soong Gollum that they have created that saves them all this money and makes Brent Spiner old, that's an improvement on the idea. That's the better android. Okay, now they're going to go with defamation as they put down B4 to elevate the Soong Gollum robot? I don't know what else to call it.
Station B4 unceremoniously sat alongside the more human-than-human M510 Soong-type creation that would bring back one of Star Trek's most beloved and missed characters.
So, there you have it. They unceremoniously stored B4 there, Data's creation. No one cared about it, it was just kind of thrown in the corner. Next to the more human than human New Trek monster 70-year-old robot that they made of Brent Spiner so that they don't have to de-age him. You know, they could de-age him if they got rid of some of those 23 producers that they had. That might be why this show is so bad. We averaged 21 producers throughout the series, never falling below it. We peaked at 23 producers, and we never had more than 2 writers. Most episodes had 1 writer. They're saving the money in the writing and the stories, as well as the special effects. Number 2 artifact in the Daystrom station is the M5 computer from the aforementioned episode, The Ultimate Computer, which is a great episode of original Star Trek that they go on to simply denigrate. So the M5, an outdated and inherently flawed computer made about 150 or so years before the events of the show Picard, give or take, is stored at Daystrom Station, which is supposed to be some kind of research facility, is actually some kind of horrific jail where they do Camp X-ray type things to innocent or portrayed as innocent aliens, where they just conduct immoral medical experiments and do things associated with the darkest acts of the bad guys in Europe in World War II. They show you every single second of the space battle from season 3 of Picard.
Being made by the station.
If you just saw that, you might be forgiven for thinking that Picard was an action-packed show, because what they show you, and they don't show you much, this is like the majority of what we got. This is about how long you see it for. You see things for 10 seconds to 30 seconds. They show you about 4 or 5 here. It's a big chunk of it. Those ships in formation are Federation ships that have been co-opted by the Borg. They don't move, though. Those formations are static. They do not maneuver at all. They do not move at all. And this is a big piece of that action scene that came in episode 10 of Star Trek Picard. This is your big action payoff. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, maybe. So that's That's what they did with that. It's just really a false representation. We've seen them spend a lot of time talking about Star Trek Picard, which concluded about 20 weeks ago, and just celebrating it and lauding it like it was some kind of good show that had events in it that it didn't have. We've seen them walking past panels that were said to be part of the show where you didn't have time to recognize this stuff. For all I know, it was put in later. I'm not rewatching season 3 of Picard to re-verify that. It was a horrible show, and it wasn't Star Trek. This is just defamation and maybe even guilt by association. Okay, so again, we're back to our opening shot. We're obsessing on the M4 and Richard Daystrom, and as you can see, Leonard Nimoy playing Spock is in picture, and you know, they're again going to go out of their way not to mention Leonard Nimoy at all. But here we go with a little new track, misinformation and propaganda.
Being made by the station's namesake, the M5 might not have been a sentient computer looking to take over the galaxy or enslave a planet, but it did make some unique choices. As part of a war game...
So they had to compare it unfavorably with their stupid AI from Star Trek Discovery. They had to go there and do that. They had to defame the invention in Ultimate Computer, which is a good Star Trek episode that they've been gunning for throughout this whole video. So after making sure to tell you that the M5 was bad and a failure, they sort of circle back to do a little more defamation and trash it. Here we go.
Its errors meant that starships would remain under biological control forevermore, with only Discovery's Zora seeming to prove the exception. Created by the state.
So like we compare it unfavorably to the STD AI, and it's just funny because every ship that we went to on the show Picard had its crew removed for some fanciful reason, including the Borg cube, where all the Borg had decided the best thing that they could do would be to self-delete so that they could become like a biological matrix to power the Borg cube that was hidden in the storm on Jupiter, facing Earth, something that we now would be able to see. It filled most of the storm on Jupiter. Telescopes that we have now on Earth would have seen it, but it was unnoticed for God knows how long by the people in Star Trek New Trek. They're blissfully unaware of what's going on in the most well-traveled solar system in the entire Federation. They couldn't check into one of their own neighboring planets. Obvious anomaly. They just ignored it. Well, we've covered 9 of 10 of these supposedly fascinating things about Daystrom Station. They weren't even Easter eggs. Some of these things were just in the background on the computer screen. This is storytelling. We've reached the #1 thing about Daystrom Station. It's its #1 secret artifact, as it describes in the in this video's title. I'm sorry about this, but it's a thing that exists, and well, here's what they have at Daystrom Station. Not happy about this, but apparently now Starfleet goes around and vultures up the bodies of their fallen officers from wherever they've been laid to rest, and they don't rebury them in a military funeral, or they don't put them in a military cemetery, and they don't have, I don't know, a satellite of their ashes or something in the vein of a memorial. No, they throw you on ice and they put you at the Section 31 base where they do inhumane medical experiments. What they don't say here, because it was actually, they managed to get that into their show, is they have Picard's body here as well, because the Picard in the show Picard is not Picard at all. In one of the key pieces of propaganda, it is a CGI ghost, well, not even, I'm sorry, it is a robot upload of Picard's personality as interpreted by a murderer through a computer file in some form of cheap resurrection after he deletes Data, who, when speaking for the audience, begs Picard to end his suffering and delete the simulation. Something I said when I turned off Picard Season 1. Now we're going to use the propaganda method of defamation and false coequivalence. What we're going to do here is we're going to show some scenes from Generations and try to draw a false coequivalence. Here it is. Sorry about this one too. It's pretty horrible, but basically what they're saying here, and it has nothing to do with the artifacts at Daystrom Station. They're just going down a rabbit hole to take a crack at older Star Trek. This is apparently something to be ashamed of. People didn't react well to the first ending of Star Trek Generations in screen tests when they used to care what audience thinks. And again, you can still see the Paramount pictures burned into the screen at the bottom here, below the taskbar. This is, in fact, professional corporate CBS bad robot propaganda by professional PR people. This is not just a regular YouTube channel that I'm reviewing and reacting to. So, let's go. I'm sorry, guys.
The original cut had him infamously shot in the back, and the subsequent reshoots following test screenings saw a more heroic demise.
So yeah, that's the thing about Generations. The beginning of the movie, it's not the worst, but you know, it's not as good as the other Star Trek movies. And then once we move on from our regular crew to the TNG crew, I don't think the movies are ever as good again. Star Trek Generations is, in a lot of ways, the first, you know, truly bad Star Trek movie. I mean, Star Trek V has problems, but I find it enjoyable. There's just not a lot redeeming about Star Trek Generations. It's okay, still Star Trek. But then we get into a bunch of Next Generation movies where, certainly starting with First Contact, we're biting off more than we can chew and not giving people the best Star Trek we can give them. It's not very well thought out or as good as what we had before, but certainly absolute Shakespeare compared to New Trek. But that is the top 10 secret artifacts at the Daystrom Station. It's propaganda and misinformation, and you can avoid it if you know what to look for. Its tools are falsehoods, defamation, guilt by association, bad faith arguments, and false coequivalence, all of which we've demonstrated for you here today. Well, it's been a lot of fun, and I hope to be live with you again soon. For now, I hope you enjoy this upload, and I'm really, really grateful to those of you who've taken the time out to watch it. My name is Admiral Teag, and this has been Saving Star Trek, Decoding Propaganda.